This is meeting number 128 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts for Thursday, February 21st, 2019. We are here today once again in consideration of Report 1, Connectivity in Rural and Remote Areas of the 2018 Fall Report to the Auditor General of Canada. And we're honored to have with us this morning from the Office of the Auditor General, Mr. Jerome Berthollet, the Assistant Auditor General, and Philippe Le Goff, Principal. From the Department of Industry, we have Deputy Minister, Mr. John Nubley, Lisa Sedlacqui, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategy and Innovation Policy Sector, and also Michelle Gravel, Director General, Audit and Evaluation Branch. And from the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunication Commission, we have Mr. Ian Scott, Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Christopher Seidel, the Executive Director of Telecommunications, and Mr. Ian Bagley, Director General Telecommunications. For those who may be interested, if you recall, we are televised today, and we had these folks with us before, but we were interrupted by votes in the House, and typically all they did at that time was open statements, and we really didn't get into very much of questioning. So they have complied with our request, and they're willing to again give us an opening statement, and we thank them for that, and we will turn our time now over Mr. Berthollet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity to discuss our Fall 2018 report on connectivity in rural and remote areas. Joining me at the table is Philippe Le Goff, who was the principal responsible for the audit. This audit focused on whether Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada and the Canadian Radio, Television and Communication Commission, according to their respective roles and responsibilities, monitored the state of connectivity and developed and implemented a plan to meet the connectivity needs of Canadians in remote and rural areas. Au cours des 12 dernières années,
over the past 12 years, detailed examination of the state of broadband access in Canada have included recommendations that the federal government lead the creation of a national broadband strategy. However, at the time we finished our audit, the government had still not agreed to take that step. Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada indicated that it was reluctant to establish a strategy with an objective that could not be reached with the available funding. The department had continued to follow an approach that expanded broadband coverage to underserved parts of the country according to when funds were available. This approach left people in rural and remote parts of the country with less access to important online services, such as education, banking, and health care, and also without information about when they could expect to have better access. On October 26, 2018, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development announced that the federal, provincial, and territorial ministers for innovation and economic development agreed to make broadband a priority and to develop a long-term strategy to improve access to high-speed internet services for all Canadians. Ministers committed to a goal of establishing universal access to internet speeds of 50 megabytes per second download and 10 megabytes per second upload. Mr. Chair, with respect to the state of connectivity in Canada, we found that the department relied on complete and accurate data to inform policymaking aimed at addressing the connectivity gap in rural and remote areas. In 2016,
funding program to bring high-speed internet to 300 rural and remote communities in Canada. We examined whether the department designed and managed this program to maximize the value for taxpayers. We found that the department did not implement the program in a way that ensured the maximum broadband expansion for the public money spent. The program did not include a way to mitigate the risk that government funds might displace private sector funds. We also found that the department did not provide key information to potential applicants for funding under the program. As a result, some applicants had to invest more effort in preparing their proposals, and all applicants lacked full knowledge of the basis for selecting funding proposals. For example, there were a number of considerations to select projects, but the application guide did not specify the relative weight of each criterion used in the project selection process. Also, projects were less likely to be funded if they did not align with provincial and territorial priorities. However, these priorities were not made public. In our view, the department should have made the weights and priorities public. Many Canadians in rural and remote areas had to rely on fixed wireless broadband solutions. We found that small internet service providers did not have sufficient access to high-quality spectrum to support broadband deployment in rural and remote areas. For example, the department auctioned spectrum licenses for geographic areas that were too large for smaller service providers to bid on. The secondary market for unused spectrum did not function well, partly because licensees had little business incentive to make unused spectrum available for subordinate licensing. In addition, the information on unused spectrum was not readily available to interested internet providers. Innovation, Sciences et Développement économique Canada et le Conseil de la radiodiffusion.
Science and Economic Development Canada and the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission have agreed with our 6 recommendations, and we understand that the department has prepared a detailed action plan. Chair, these are my opening remarks. We will be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
We'll now turn to our Deputy Minister, Mr. Nubley, for his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to say that overall, the Government of Canada sees connectivity and broadband as a critical enabler. It really is the way for all Canadians to participate in growth, economic growth, innovation, and social inclusion. Overall, we also agree with the recommendations of the Auditor General, and I thought I should, at the outset, acknowledge the contribution of the former Auditor General, Ferguson.
Thank you.
We had several good conversations about this topic. J'aimerais commencer par...
I would like to begin by thanking the Auditor General and the previous report and his office for their report. This is an extremely important set of issues. We accept the recommendations that are moving forward to improve rural and remote connectivity.
Specific areas of comment in the Auditor General's chapter. First on strategy, second on programs, and third on spectrum. On strategy, we agree on the need for a connectivity strategy, particularly in light of the CRTC decision in December 2016 declaring broadband a basic service and setting that 50-10 target. I personally believe that this declaration has created a significant inflection point for the delivery of broadband, which has required us to move from an evolutionary step-by-step approach addressing gaps to a more collaborated, integrated approach to broadband. The department's broadband programs predate this announcement from CRTC as a basic service. And as I said, they were designed to be step-by-step and focusing on specific gaps in services, coverages, and speed. We focused on closing the gaps in speeds between urban and rural areas in a way that carefully balances the public interest and the private investment. We do want to avoid crowding out private investment in whatever we do. I would also want to stress to members that, and to the chair, that this connectivity is very much a moving target. Technology is constantly changing and improving. In this context, that strategy is important, particularly as we set specific goals. However, it's constantly evolving. Only a few years ago, our target was 5 and 1 as opposed to 50 and 10. As indicated earlier, work is already underway on a strategy. This past spring, we established a federal provincial territorial connectivity committee. There had been existing federal provincial groups before, but we formalized it. And in June, the department launched a national digital and data strategy consultation where connectivity was the foundational component. On September 25th, Minister Baines released the Economic Strategy Tables report, which focused on 6 sectors, and this included the importance of broadband and digital infrastructure for economic growth, innovation, and social inclusion. And then finally, on October 26th of last year, the federal provincial territorial ministers met, and they agreed to make broadband a priority as a group and to work together to that end. And they agreed to a set of connectivity principles and to develop a long-term strategy to improve access to high-speed internet and mobile services for Canadians. In other words, they accepted the 50-10 goal and the objective of serving Canadians with broadband as a basic service. They did announce 3 specific principles: 1, access to ensure reliable, high-quality service; 2, collaboration to leverage all partners and to end fragmentation; and 3, effective instruments, especially targeting market failures so that government supports this where it is most needed in the rural context, and in other words, does not crowd out private investment. I would like to end the comments on the strategy to remind members that, in fact, the department has been very active in the digital and connectivity space for many years. It goes back to really Minister Manley, and there was a national broadband task force in 2001 led by David Johnson. If you look at their principles, and I suspect I'll point them out to you later, you will see that they are remarkably similar to the ones that are at the heart of our new strategy. And the department has been committed for many years to providing programming around education related to digital and broadband activity. And I can talk to you about some of those programs. Second area of focus for the Auditor General was our 2 programs, Connecting Canadians, which is a $240 million 5-year program launched in 2014 to install last mile connection for households. And then our more recent Connect to Innovate program, which is a $500 million 5-year program launched in 2016 to support primarily new backbone infrastructure to connect institutions such as schools and hospitals to ensure communities have access to broadband. I do want to stress that the findings of the audit focus solely on the design phase of the Connect to Innovate program. That's where we were at the time of the work of the Auditor General. I am pleased to report, and I've been asked to do so by Minister Baines, that the program will connect 900 communities across Canada. That's 3 times the program's original target of 300 communities. Of the 900 communities, 190 are Indigenous communities, some in the direst need of better high-speed internet. And I want to stress that above all, what was targeted in this program were the areas highest need for rural broadband, typically where the private sector is not inclined to go. And overall, our $500 million program leveraged another $500 million so that $1 billion is dedicated towards improved connectivity. Let me just turn to the issue of spectrum and the issues raised there by the Auditor General. We certainly agree that the impact on rural and remote areas is a very important consideration when developing spectrum activities or licensing frameworks. We continue to develop policies that encourage service into rural areas to ensure that all Canadians will benefit from high-quality services, coverage, and affordable prices. For example, we've just published a consultation on the development of similar geographic service areas for spectrum license, which is known as the Tier 5 consultation. And this was referenced in the Auditor General's report. What we have been doing is trying to drill down to a smaller geographical service area so that we have a better understanding and mapping of what can be available to Canadians. Also, the 600 megahertz spectrum auction is scheduled to take place shortly. This spectrum can provide expanded rural coverage, specifically because we set aside 40% of the spectrum for regional service providers. Let me conclude by just reaffirming that we recognize how important affordable, high-speed connectivity and broadband is for rural communities and Canadians. And we all work very hard to ensure that we service and meet the objectives related to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nubley. Now we'll move to the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunication Commission and to Mr. Scott, please.
Bonjour. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good morning, Chair, members.
Introducing myself and my colleagues, as the President Chairman has already done so. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before this committee to discuss the findings of the Office of the Auditor General and to explain the CRTC's role in increasing connectivity for Canadians living in rural and remote areas of our country. As the Auditor General's report noted, the Commission has a limited but important role to play. Our job as an independent regulator is to ensure that Canadians have access to a world-class communication system that promotes innovation and enriches their lives. We believe that all Canadians, no matter where they live, should have access to broadband internet services on both fixed and mobile networks. As the Auditor General's report underlines, connectivity is vital in today's world. Broadband is the critical tool we use to communicate with each other, educate and entertain ourselves, find information, apply for jobs, and do routine activities, from banking to accessing healthcare and other government services. So Canadians need access to an unfettered Internet experience. Le CRTC ne gère pas toutes les...
The CRTC does not hold all the strings or control everything, but we want to help people advance this goal. A perfect example is that the Commission's December 2016 announcement that broadband internet is now considered a basic telecommunications services. This is really a perfect example.
Service objective, as just mentioned by the Deputy Minister. It called for all Canadians to have access to fixed broadband services at download speeds of at least 50 megabits per second and upload speeds of 10 megabits per second, as well as access to an unlimited data option. The latest wireless technology, currently known as LTE, long-term evolution, should be available not only in Canadian homes and businesses, but also on major roads in Canada. By the end of 2021, we expect that 90% of Canadian households will have access to speeds matching the universal service objective. By our current estimates, it will take another decade or so after that for the remaining 10% to join them. Mr. Chairman, 84% of Canadians have access to the internet at the new speed targets today. However, many people, particularly those living in rural and remote areas, can only dream of this level of service. While 97% of households in urban areas have access to service that meets the universal service objective, only 37% in rural areas have similar access. Par conséquent, 16%.
As a result, 16% of Canadian households, or nearly 2 million Canadians, still don't have access to the universal service objective speeds or unlimited data option. Fast, reliable, high-quality internet is simply out of reach, whether physically or financially in many parts of this country. That message came through loud and clear during the CRTC's public hearings on basic telecommunication services. We heard from more than 50,000 people, individual Canadians, business owners, and leaders of Indigenous communities. Many of them told us that they are being left behind in the digital age.
Of course, vary by region. Smaller maritime and prairie communities often do not enjoy the high speeds of major urban centers. The worst off and most in need are almost always found in the Canadian North. Efforts to close these gaps need to be coordinated, as they are a shared responsibility among numerous players. Beyond the CRTC, this includes, of course, industry, science, and economic development, but also the provinces and territories, Indigenous governments, the telecommunications industry itself, and of course, non-governmental organizations. For its part, the CRTC has announced a new broadband fund. It will provide up to $750 million over the next 5 years to help pay for infrastructure to extend internet and mobile wireless services to underserved areas. Our objective is to ensure that rural residents have comparable service to those in urban areas. Of that $750 million to be made available, up to 10% of the annual total will be provided to improve services in satellite-dependent communities. These are communities that rely exclusively on satellite transport to receive one or more telecommunication services, such as telephone, fixed, and mobile wireless or internet services. Of course, when we launch our first call for applications this year, it'll be important for potential applicants to know where the greatest needs are located. And we agree with the Auditor General's report on this issue. Le mois dernier, or several ago now, nous avons publié des
Several months ago now, we published maps indicating the areas of the country that do not have access to broadband speeds of 50 megabytes for download and 10 megabytes for upload. The maps also identify communities without high-capacity transport infrastructure and where homes or major roads do not have access to LTE mobile wireless service. In short, the areas of the country that do not currently meet our universal service objective. We have asked internet and wireless service providers to verify the accuracy of our maps. This is consistent with our overall approach regarding broadband data. We make information available to the public in as much detail as possible while respecting the confidentiality provisions of the Telecommunications Act. In fact, we will soon publish an update to our annual communications monitoring report that will provide some fresh data on broadband availability and other related information.
Memorandum of Understanding was established a number of years ago between the CRTC and Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. This agreement governs our collaboration and the data that is shared between our organizations. We're committed to sharing information on broadband infrastructure to support evidence-based decision-making. We're also committed to working with all levels of government as part of a collaborative effort to provide broadband internet service to underserved Canadians. Since announcing the details of our fund late last year, we've met with representatives from provincial and territorial governments, as well as all the relevant federal departments, to explain how the fund will work and to understand their broadband funding plans. Mr. Chairman, members, extending broadband and mobile coverage to underserved households, businesses, and along major roads will require billions of dollars in investment in infrastructure. There is no doubt that this objective is an ambitious one, in part because of our vast geography and shorter construction seasons in many parts of the country. The CRTC's Broadband Fund is obviously just one part of the equation. It is meant to be complementary to, but not a replacement for, existing and future public funding and private investment. Having detailed, accurate, up-to-date information at the disposal of public and policymakers will ensure that funds are being directed to the most appropriate projects and communities. There's also no doubt that much work remains to be done. I'm confident, however, that this objective will be met in the same manner that railways and electrical grids were built in the past, by connecting one community at a time. Merci. Nous serions maintenant heureux.
Thank you, and we will be very happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Scott and all for your presentations. We'll now move into the first round. The first round is a 7-minute round, and I welcome Mr. DeBerg Graham.
First of all, Mr. Bertlet, at the outset, condolences for the loss of Michael Ferguson. Many more communities got service than intended in the program. The program had a target of 300, and as we just heard from Mr. Nubley, some 900 communities got service, including some 190 Indigenous communities. How is this a failure?
Mr. Legoff. I don't see that as a failure.
I want to make sure of that. In my own riding, some $13 million of federal money out of a $47 million project is going to put 16,000 households across 17 municipalities on fiber optic in a territory 3 times the size of PEI. In what way did we not get value for the money we spent?
Mr. Chair, I think I cannot comment on a specific case like yours. We look at the design of the program at the time of the audit, simply. And we determined that the approach was not, will not facilitate value for money.
Will not facilitate or did not achieve? And what we see in the projects that I've seen across the country is quite good value for the money, considering that it typically costs $2,000 or $3,000 per household to connect rural to fiber, and in a lot of cases, this program came in well below that. So I'm trying to understand on what basis this didn't get value for its money.
Mr. Chair, I would say that we look only again at the design of the program, and it was among the criteria determined by the department at the time that they would not focus really solely on value for money, but they had other criteria to make decisions.
Is that a bad thing?
Well, I would say, Mr. Chair, that the audit was designed to look at value for money, and it's what we looked at, and we concluded on this thing.
In the opening comments, there's a reference from Mr. Bertlet about displacing private funds, which I find it's a big red flag for me when I hear that, because that's an assumption that private funds are interested in coming to these communities. And what we see is private funds don't come to the communities. They go into the downtown core of a rural area, if there is a downtown core of a village, and they'll offer service there. But everybody on the ranges forget them. They're not worth funding. They're not worth investing in. And the private companies only come to those areas when the public invests money, and then they say, "Oh, we're going to lose our market share, so now we're going to start investing." So I have a lot of trouble swallowing the concept that this program in any way displays private funds. If anything, private funds attempt to displace public funds when they arrive. How do you see that assessment?
Mr. Chair, I would say that our main concern about this is that in some cases, private funds could have been spent anyway despite the program. And because the program existed, the private funds took advantage of that.
So on that basis, the 4,000 communities that have not yet received funding, or more or less, should all have private investment coming and shouldn't need to continue to worry about this.
Mr. Chair, I think one of the philosophy behind the programs of the department is that they're looking to private funds to actually try to actually expand broadband. Mm-hmm. So when we looked at the program, we were looking at how do you maximize private funding. There will be cases where private funds are not going to be made available because of the isolation perhaps and the cost. But there may be cases where a combination of private funds and public funds are going to be needed. And ideally, we will look to the department to make sure that it maximizes private funds and maximizes the benefit that we get from the public funds. And I think what we heard today is that they've managed to get a one-for-one investment from the private funds. And I think that's probably a good thing.
So the audit sounds like you're not happy with that, but here you're saying you are happy with that. Are we happy with how the program went?
Well, I think at the time we were looking at how the program was designed, right? And we were looking at making recommendations that helped ensure that the department achieved its goal, which was to try to maximize the private funds. At this point, with the knowledge that we have, I'd say they're being fairly successful at achieving that goal. But we haven't audited this, right? So I think I will hold off on saying whether it is as successful as it could be until we've actually audited what has transpired so far.
Okay, because my assessment of what I'm seeing is that if there's any problem to identify here, that there simply wasn't enough money in the program to begin with. But as far as the operation of the program, I have trouble finding the problems that have been identified in the audit. But I do have questions for the other witnesses as well, so I'm going to move on to them. I may come back to you later on. Mr. Scott, you mentioned that you have a limited but important role. Do you find the CRTC's hands are tied in any way? And is there any way for us to help untie them?
No, I don't believe the Commission's hands are tied in any way. We have a very constructive working relationship with ISED in relation to these and the development of broadband maps and ongoing coordination. We too will assist the department in the federal, provincial, territorial discussions. So no, the Commission has a somewhat different role because we are an arm's length independent agency, and so there are times when we are more, for lack of a better term, insular, or we must be, to respect our arm's length relationship. But no, there's no impediments to us working towards fulfilling these broadband objectives.
One of the problems that I keep running into is market position abuse by large telecom, mainly Bell, in our area. Do you have the tools in your mandate to deal with the problems brought up by vertical integration in telecom and market position abuse? For example, making it very, very difficult to get onto hydro poles to put new fiber line on for a different company?
There are a number of elements packed into that question. Perhaps I'll
Feel free to take it apart.
Take the last one first. You're, I'm sure, aware that there is currently a review of both the Broadcasting Act and Telecom Act underway. The government established a review panel that will be making its recommendations. We've made public submission to that panel. One of the issues we have highlighted is the importance and the current and future importance of passive infrastructure, very much things in particular as we look towards the deployment of 5G mobile technology. There will be more and more devices to be deployed, not only on traditional rights of way, whether they be provincial or municipal and poles, but also things like municipal controlled or owned bus shelters, lamp posts, and so on. And this will represent a formidable challenge in the future. And we have pointed out that as the legislation is reviewed, it will be very important that parliamentarians pay particular attention to that issue. So that we have a resolution, so that we'll be able to ensure that both broadband and wireless technology in the future is effectively deployed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott and Mr. Graham. We'll now move to the opposition and to Mr. Dan Oblis. Welcome to committee, and you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly appreciate all of the testimony that's here today. I look forward to hearing from your expertise on this report. Just further to Mr. DeBerg-Graham's comments, and I heard this from the member from Pontiac last night, bragging about how much money that they had received from a largely rural area. The reality is, for people in Logan Lake, is quite opposite from Mr. DeBerg-Graham, where you'll have a coffee or a cafe owner where they can't get sufficient download speeds so that they can charge their customers Interac and have to give free coffees that day. That's a problem. So I certainly appreciate that we're focusing on it. I appreciate the Auditor General making this one of your audits. I'll start with the CRTC. Mr. Scott, why did you cut your speed target in half from 50 megabits down to 25 megabits?
I am very pleased to answer that question because the premise is incorrect, with all due respect. We did not cut it. The target is 50. And we look forward to seeing that target fulfilled. What we allowed for in the decision that we released, where we set out all of the details for how one could apply for the fund, is that we will allow in certain circumstances will accept applications for 25 megabit service where it can clearly be scaled up to 50. And the reason for that is if we had not made that decision, there were a lot of communities that will wait until well after 2021 because they simply can't get to 50 from where they are today, which might be 3 or 4 or 5 megabit per second. So what we were doing was not limiting, but expanding the potential number of communities.
So, sir, with all due respect, you can say you did not cut it in half, but the reality is your proposals for projects mandate a speed of 25 megabits and half of the proposed target. To Canadians I speak to, that sounds a lot like a cut. If you think that 50 megabits is necessary, why would you only accept projects that seek to deliver half of that?
For the reason I just said, if we insist on accepting no applications that if we insist on accepting applications that only can reach 50, many of those communities will not be included. And it's not to say that they will not get to 50. We will only consider applications at 25 megabit per second that have a clear path to 50, and it will result in more communities receiving a higher grade of service sooner than they otherwise would.
It does sound, sir, like you're saying that there are two-tier communities. And while I do recognize there are costs and there are unique situations, you would think that you would come forward with an actual project plan that would actually deal with that. That being said,
We
I'm going to
have,
move.
sir.
Well, again, we'll let Canadians decide, sir. I'd like to move over to Mr. Nubley. Deputy Minister, I asked you a few months ago if your department would ensure that rural fixed wireless customers would not be negatively impacted in an upcoming government clawback of the 3,500 megahertz. Now, at that time, you expressed to me that you would do your darndest to make sure that that rural residents weren't negatively impacted. Is that still your position on this critical issue? Because I'm hearing concerns from rural Canadians that think the opposite.
Yeah, no, that's still my position, and the 3,500 issues have not yet been moved forward, but they will be in due course. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, on the 600 side, we did set aside 40% of the spectrum for rural purposes.
Sir, and I do appreciate that this is a very complex file, but when your department is speaking about clawing back the 3,500 megahertz spectrum, and there's no certainty that they're going to keep that is cold comfort. Now, further in the Auditor General's report, there have been many calls for a complete strategy for addressing the deficit in internet access for rural remote Canadians. Even in your own comments, sir, you talked about very well-known Canadians, David Johnston, former Minister Manley, who have worked long on setting out some of the basic principles towards seeing a national standard and to see rural Canadians fully joining the economy. Now, the government so far has refused to produce such a strategy that the Auditor General had sought. So I ask, why the refusal to develop a strategy thus far? What is the status of the strategy spoken of the report? And sir, when Canadians hear that the principles have been outlined since 2001, and yet they have the Auditor General saying that those principles have not been actually formulated in a plan, you can see some of the skepticism. Or again, I go to places like Logan Lake, Karamias, Princeton, that have concerns about their high speed.
So the strategy since 2001, consistent with the Johnson Task Force, has been to do a staged approach to addressing the gaps in broadband service for Canadians. So we've had 5 programs since 2001, contributing $1 billion overall from a government perspective to addressing and fixing these gaps. What we are doing now, in light of the decision that broadband is a basic service, and we have a goal of a 50-10 variety. We are working with provinces and the private sector, recognizing that we have a common objective, and we have a time frame of addressing this 10% in 10 to 15 years. So again, we formalized much more than in the past our working groups at the federal provincial level. And as I mentioned, ministers met last fall, and committed to meet the goal of 50-10 and to develop an integrated strategy related to this. So in that context, officials are working together to develop province by province, territory by territory, how we would proceed on this basis.
So, sir, that does sound oddly like a plan to have a plan. Can you tell us where the status of it is? When will this plan be forthcoming?
Well, we have a plan. We have an objective of 50-10. We know that there's another 5% that will evolve through the private sector in the next 5 years, and we are working together with all the stakeholders to address this 10% gap.
Okay, well, again, the objective is, I think, Mr. Chair, is different than a plan.
Thank you, Mr. Albus and Mr. Nobley. We'll now move to Mr. Christofferson, please, for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here again. I want to start, as I often do, with the focus right at the beginning. And page 3, it says the audit focused on whether Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada and the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, according to their respective roles and responsibilities, monitored the state of connectivity and developed and implemented a strategy to meet the connectivity needs of Canadians in rural and remote areas. And the conclusion on page 20, we concluded that Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada and the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, according to their respective roles and responsibilities, monitored the state of connectivity, so congratulations, but did not share enough detailed information publicly. We also concluded that Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada did not develop and implement a national strategy to improve broadband internet connectivity to a specific service level in rural and remote areas. And that's going to be the focus of my comments. But I do want to start, I like to where I can, where it's deserved, to give some credit, to start on a positive note. And when I read the data, as mentioned by Mr. Bartolotti in paragraph 5 of his opening remarks, he advised us, Mr. Chair, with respect to the state of connectivity in Canada, we found that the department relied on complete and accurate data to inform policy making aimed at addressing the connectivity gap in rural and remote areas. So, by the looks of it, you did a good job on data. Data has been a major priority for us in this term of Parliament, and so congratulations on that. That's well done. Now, I want to get to this business of a national strategy because there's a piece missing, and I'm not getting it. There are 12 years of studies that said we need a national broadband strategy, and yet, Mr. Bartolotti, you say that when in your third paragraph of your opening remarks, to be specific, it states that the 12 years, they've needed a national strategy. However, and I'm quoting, at the time we finished our audit, the government had still not agreed to take that step. Now, I know they have subsequent, but at the time, no. Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada indicated it was reluctant to establish a strategy with an objective that could not be reached within the available funding, end quote. Mr. Bartolotti, would you just expand on that, please? Because it sounds backwards to me. But again, if you would just reiterate your findings.
Mr. Berthelette? Mr. Legoff?
So, Mr. Chair, at the time of the audit, the department was provided with a set amount of money that was from its perspective, and I think we can share that perspective, not enough to meet the needs of Canadians.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's the way I read it too. I just wanted to hear it straight up because it seems to me in the 3.5 decades I've been in public life, whenever we're faced with a public challenge, the first thing we do is get a strategy, get a plan, and then start working it, get the funding. And if we can't get all the funding up front, then there's a phase in, and we can get into the politics of when that money kicks in. But the idea that we don't do a strategy because the money's not there up front makes no sense at all to me. So I will turn to the deputy. Help me understand when there are repeated recommendations that there needs to be a national strategy, but your department didn't do a strategy because you didn't have sufficient funds. I don't get it.
To you this way, Mr. Chair. So I think it is important for members to understand that since 2001, there has been a staged approach, which is a strategy, to closing gaps in terms of broadband. The strategy has been to identify where there are the areas of greatest need and to address those. What has happened as a result of the declaration in December 2016 that broadband is a basic service and that we are all agreeing as a country to move towards a 50-10 goal, because there has in the past been different views on what the goal should be. Should it be 5-1? Should it be 30? Should it be 50-10? We are now in a position, thanks to the CRTC, I would say, to work together in an integrated way to really address the issues together, provinces, private sector, et cetera. Now, just one more point in terms of that staged approach. I think what was the underlying policy issue at play always, and it continues to be even in this new integrated world we're in, is how do we ensure that we get value for money and do not crowd out what private sector that would normally occur. So there's always a balancing act going on between what is the public interest in closing these gaps and how do we work with the private sector and indeed with provinces and communities to ensure that there is value for money as we go
Yeah, I
forward.
appreciate that. It's still, I'm sorry, sir. It is still, that was nice. It was, I guess, somewhat informative, but it didn't answer my question. My question is, why wasn't a strategy put in place? And I hear you sound like there was bits and pieces of one.
So there was a strategy of staged implementation. And then
But it
now
wasn't a
we've moved-
national strategy.
And now we've moved to a national strategy.
Well, now you've moved to a national strategy. And my question is, why wasn't there one in the beginning? If it was a healthcare issue, I mean, it's not like we don't know these challenges. Transportation, healthcare, community services. It's always difficult in a large country like this, and it's expensive. That's why we have plans and phase in, and that's why there's constant protests coming from the north and far-flung regions, why they're not getting the equal service that we can get in my hometown of Hamilton. But what I don't understand is why there wasn't a national strategy, and it sounds like there wasn't one because the money's not there to do one. And that's just not acceptable. If this was a health challenge, we would have recognized that health challenge and we would put a national strategy in place. The absence of a national strategy, it looks to me like the politics of this, which is beyond one step beyond you, but the politics of this are, we don't have the money and we don't want to pony up the money, so let's not have a strategy because that'll give opponents something to point to in terms of what's not being done. And now it looks like they've just run out of runway and they got no choice but to do it, and they're dragging their heels at that. And so this is one of those times, Chair, and I know my time has run out probably. Thank you. But I'll just finish my thought. This may be, but may be one of the very few times in the 15 years I've been on this committee when we do need to call a minister in, because it may just be that the answer to the problem has been that the bureaucracy has been told there's not enough money to do a strategy, so don't even think of starting one. And if that's the case, then there's got to be a political answer to this, not a bureaucratic one.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. We'll now move back to Monsieur Arsenault. Monsieur Arsenault, vous avez 7 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
7 minutes. Thank you. I'm new on the committee. This is my second meeting. So I don't have all the background of the witnesses who have come here in the past. So I apologize in advance if some of my questions are repetitive. I come from an extremely rural area, not the far north of Quebec, nor Sable Island. I'm from northern New Brunswick, that is in the interior of Canada. Well, Madawaska-Restigouche, to be quite precise. This lack of service, the lack of broadband, is a constant irritant. It is something that prevents the economic development of my riding. I can think of many places in Atlantic Canada or elsewhere in the country where they have difficulties and the economy suffers. And therefore, it's very difficult to keep people at home, educated people at home, because the economy is poor and there's a general exodus. People leave in search of jobs. I'm painting a picture for you. I know you've all already heard all this. But in terms of the economy and safety, well, my region is based on forestry for the most part. A great deal of forestry activity. And, if there's a problem, say somebody gets wounded or hurt, there's not even a telephone service. We're not talking police and firemen here. All of this makes us lag far behind the rest of Canada. I don't know who I should ask my first question to. Perhaps I think it's Mr. Scott who spoke about essential services to bring all of Canada together. In the past, it was the railway that was built to do that. It wasn't privatized at the time. It was a national project when the railway was built. It was the same thing in New Brunswick when we got telephone service. It wasn't from the private sector. So I'm thinking about that just in passing. So to my friends, to you or your colleagues, Mr. in the department, what should the strategy be to be developed so that once and for all we could offer equal services throughout Canada to all Canadians? Well, I think that first of all we have to stress this. The federal, provincial, and territorial ministers met in October, and they did decide to set up a strategy. They spoke about targets, 50-10, and they agreed that that would be an advantageous target. Then also, they asked the officials to work on that so that we would be in a position to identify the needs that exist in an integrated way where the provinces and the federal government and the private sector could work together to reach that 50-10 goal. Okay, I'm quite convinced that now, thanks to the CRTC, we are better placed. We're in a better position to achieve that goal because we are working together with a very clear goal in mind, a clear target, and we have the tools to be able to share and work together to collaborate. They will have access to innovation, and collaboration will be one of the basic principles. All of that will allow us to attain our goal. There's a team working on that. Lisa perhaps could say a few words to that effect. What we're doing right now is province by province, territory by territory. We're trying to establish what the gaps are and how much that will cost to bridge the gaps. We're now at the point where the sectors that were more easily attainable have been attained. We're looking at rural. We're going beyond rural. It may be more complicated. The technology will be more complicated to provide it there, but we haven't yet finalized the work that we're doing. We believe it will cost some $8 billion, and in that figure, $7 billion will be used to join, to reach the communities and the people who request the service in the communities. Where we have $1 billion for the importance of certain sectors. You spoke about in your riding the importance of the forestry sector. Yes, yes. We need forest roads. Well, we would like to be able to at least enable the main roads. In addition to the $8 billion, no, the $1 billion rather, I'm talking to you about is part of the $8 billion. It's not in addition to. But we are working with the CRTC and the provinces and territories to achieve our goal. Is my time up already?
Mr. Kelly, please. Mr. Kelly, we're in the second round now, so you have around 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, again, at this committee, we have a report from the Auditor General, and we have departments that have said that they accept the findings of the Auditor General. Yet, in the testimony that I've heard, in particular in the answers to Mr. Christofferson's question, I sense pushback and defensiveness around the conclusion of the Auditor General. So I'm going to ask Mr. Nubley to explain this. The Auditor General has said that your department did not have a national strategy. Mr. Christofferson asked you why, and if I heard you correctly, I heard not only in the answer to his questions, but to some of the other questions that were asked, you repeatedly gone back to the Johnson report of 18 years ago, identified it as a strategy, one with which for which the objectives seem largely still unfulfilled 18 years later. I'm going to repeat the question. Why was there no national strategy, in particular after the CRTC declared broadband to be a public necessity? I mean, it's easy to declare something a necessity. That those are just words. Once you do that, though, there has to be a strategy and a plan to achieve objectives. So, please, do you accept the Auditor General's assessment that it was no national strategy? And if so, why was there no national strategy?
So I think the nuance that I'm trying to bring to this is that what the Auditor General raised, and we agree with that, is that there was no national integrated strategy with a common agreed upon goal. In this case, we have now reached 50-10, and we have not in the past had a situation where all of the players, whether provinces or the federal government or even the private sector, have agreed on that goal and moved ahead.
Okay.
So what so I do agree that there was no national integrated strategy in that sense. And the Auditor General was totally appropriate to point that out. And what I'm saying in addition is very shortly after the identification by the CRTC of broadband as a basic service, the government moved very quickly ahead to work with provinces to agree that this 50-10 was a goal, to bring together working groups that include the CRTC and provinces to do work on an integrated strategy. So,
okay, sir, you did not answer my question. You did not answer Mr. Christofferson's question. Why was there no strategy? If this was something that has been identified and understood for years, if the objectives
because
have been,
no one
been
could
largely
agree
unchanged,
on a common technological goal. Provinces might have 30 as a goal, 5-1. Technology is always an issue. Various players don't always agree on the extent to which the private sector will go in and solve a situation, or where they will invest. Because as the Auditor General pointed out in terms of value for money, a big issue is how do you balance public investment with private sector investment? So even in the case of this 50-10 goal that we have already identified that we're going to move from 84 to 90 really with private sector investment. Private sector companies invest $12 billion a year
Okay.
to do this.
So
Again, I guess I am saying that it's not straightforward. It's complex. And what the nuance that I'm trying to bring to this was that all governments in the last 15 years of whatever stripe have taken the approach of identifying specific gaps. It's a staged approach. What are the specific problems that we're trying to address? Are we trying to do the last mile where we take hardwired to households? Are we trying to do more backbone type activity where we take the broadband to a community, to a school? What's the best solution to help the community and to provide the best service to these very remote areas that Canada encounters across the country?
So the reason is just there wasn't coordination and couldn't be coordination with provinces. That's why there was no.
There's issues of coordination, technology, and there is issues of money. As you have just heard, the cost to meet the 50-10 goal, at least as we currently estimate, is $8 to $9
Okay, but
billion.
that
Very quickly, summarize. We'll come back to you.
well, that's then a political question. If there's no money, I mean, you can have a strategy and a public strategy, and if a government won't fund your strategy, then that's a political question and one for the voters. But
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. We'll now move to Mr. Sarai.
I'll be sharing my time with Mr. Arsenault. I have a couple quick questions. But first of all, it seems like despite what my colleagues on the other side are saying, that it seems like the strategy is working and there is 900 communities connected or being connected. My first question is to the Deputy Minister. How are we ensuring that the conductivity infrastructure is designed to grow and expand, i.e., newer, higher speed demands? Are the conduits being made? Is the infrastructure being built so that we can expand to faster speeds and more, or will it have to be rebuilt every time? Is that being looked at when this infrastructure is being built?
Yes, it's being constantly reviewed and assessed. There's several ways we do that. One way would be this mapping activity that's been referenced, which is in fact shared publicly. We basically look at 20 areas of 25 square miles. We look at the number of people, the households, the community needs, and then we put on top of that the actual ISP map, if you like, of current service. And then we try to assess what the gaps are and what are the specific needs in those particular areas. And Lisa can elaborate on this, but basically we work with CRTC and we're with the provinces and with the private sector continually to reassess what we're doing. So specifically right now, because of the 50-10 goal, we're trying to identify where are those gaps across the country and what are the priorities in that regard. Just very quickly, there's also spectrum, of course, where we auction spectrum and the private sector participates in those auctions. So as I mentioned, we typically look at will there be dominance? Do we need to set aside certain amounts of spectrum for the rural area and to promote the participation of smaller ISPs?
And on that same token, how are you making sure that there's clusters, certain service providers? Because if there's only small communities with very small populations, you don't want to have a TELUS in one place and a Rogers in another. How are we making sure that there's enough critical mass for a cluster to keep expanding, making sure that the speed and the type of service is adequate to technological needs?
Yeah, why don't you answer that?
So, just to go back to your first question as well, so one of the things that is assessed under Connect and Innovate, for example, is in fact the technology that's being used and the potential for scalability in the future. So those are things that are definitely considered. And then when we are providing federal funding, there is a requirement for those receiving that federal funding to share their infrastructure under certain terms and conditions, and but that is a requirement as well. So we try to use all the levers that we have to try and promote competition, basically.
Good. And as my riding is only 40 square kilometers, I will give it to Mr. Arsenault.
Mine is 12,000. Merci.
Thank you for your answers. I'm not a technician, and but I know there have to be agreements, federal, provincial, and territorial agreements. I'm sure that can be brought about. As to technology, I think that you will be supporting us, but basically the crux of the matter is money. Last year, I went around the ISP providers, the principal suppliers in my riding, and asked them what they needed. What they told us was this: if you give us the money, we'll be able to move forward. But without it, we can't, because we're working and living in a capitalist world. So to the CRTC, in your area of work, your area of jurisdiction, how can I phrase this? We're dealing with what amounts to monopoly. We're not naive here. How can you encourage these people when, according to them, when they receive their privileges in the context of their license, what is expected of them by the CRTC? How can you do something that will be appreciated for all Canadians? Forest to forest, sea to sea to sea. If you can, how can you do it?
We'll come back to Mr. Albus, please.
And Mr. Chair. So in this report, the Auditor General recommended the government create detailed connectivity maps and to have those available. So in speaking to stakeholders, I've learned there also seems to be a complete deficit of information and what infrastructure is truly in the ground. So I'm going to ask both industry and the CRTC, do either of your organizations have a full and complete map of the telecommunications infrastructure that is installed throughout our country?
So we have what's called a National Broadband Services Accessibility Map, and you can go and access it. All Canadians can get into the map itself. It's really a searchable map, and as I mentioned, it's a summary of the current services by area, and that area is typically defined by this 25 kilometers square area. It shows population, it shows communities, and then it shows ISP footprints. The challenge with the sharing of information is that some of that actual ISP footprint aspect is commercially sensitive. So in that particular area, we have to aggregate up some of the data. But basically, also on our maps, we mentioned the Connect to Innovate program, also the 2014 program, Connecting Canadians. People can go on our map and see where the projects are, and they're on the map. And then lastly, the thing that we've done with our map more recently, and we've been working with CRTC on this, is to try and show, if 5010 is our goal, where are the gaps in terms of 5010 service.
So do you actually have an inventory somewhere of all of the telecommunications infrastructure, where it is, I do realize that there's obviously some sensitivities about releasing that information to the public, but I'd like to know whether or not the government actually has an understanding or its own inventory, or are you relying on the information that telecommunications companies give you?
Well, it's constantly a discussion with the private sector, and then we do verification of what that service provision is by talking to the communities and the people. We're constantly doing consultations really to verify what it is that we know in relation to spectrum,
So,
for
but
example.
there is no formal list that you have where you've required that. It's just simply, we'd like to know what you have, and then you display some of that information so that Canadians can have that.
Mr. Scott, please.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just add briefly, obviously for the carriers for which the CRTC has regulatory authority, we do obtain detailed information. It's not voluntary. They regularly file information with us, and it's that information along with that collected by the ISED department that is used to populate the data in the broadband maps.
Thank you. So ISED has started to consult on smaller geographic areas for spectrum allocation to the Auditor General. Is that move consistent with the recommendations in your report? And to industry, is the thinking that smaller geographic areas will be used for all spectrum auctions going forward?
Mr. Chair, I think it's a move in the right direction, according to what we heard from ISP, small internet service providers, that raised this issue that they don't have the capacity nor the technical capacity, the financial and technical capacity to provide the service or to bid on auctions for large tiers like tiers 2 and 3 and even 4. So I think it's a step in the right direction to look at tier 5 kind of size to allow small providers to participate.
So to clarify, we are consulting on the Tier 5, and no decision has yet been made on how we would move to that Tier 5. Let me just again give a little bit of background. So Tier 1 basically is Canada. Tier 2 is basically by province. Tier 3 has 59 regional areas, which is basically the higher population cities, if you like. And we use that for mid-range frequency bands. And then Tier 4 is 172 local areas. So we certainly think that we would benefit by going deeper and more granular in terms of our service areas, and in that respect agree with what the Auditor General raised, but we haven't made the formal decision on how we will move forward.
What would be the timeline for revealing that, the outcomes of those consultations?
In terms of the consultations are ongoing right now, so I think we will be reporting on the consultations.
Probably later this year or early next year.
Thank you, Mr. Albus. We'll now move to Ms. Yip, please. Ms. Yip, you have 5 minutes. You were mentioning to me in Indigenous.
So,
You said
how can the groundwork for 5G be started if the most remote communities? Oh, it's not on. Sorry. Did you hear my question? Yes. Okay. If the most remote communities haven't been serviced, wouldn't it be better to spend the money to service these communities before paying for the 5G groundwork?
Yeah, you go first.
Perhaps I can begin. I think technology in this area is evolving quite quickly. One of the things that, and my colleagues may want to add to this, one of the things that we're seeing is fiber is being pushed out farther and farther into the network, not only to provide broadband service, but also to support mobile wireless service and in future 5G. So I think a few years from now, there may not be much of a distinguishing between the two. And so all of this infrastructure, as it's being pushed, the higher capacity, higher bandwidth, higher speed infrastructure is being pushed out both to small and large communities, and that will enable both high-speed broadband and 5G. I'm not sure if that helps as a starting point in response to your question.
Yes. I just feel badly still for those remote communities that just don't have it or don't
So
have.
maybe I'd add, though, I think that one thing we do, and we looked at this both, really in our last 2 programs, Connect, Innovate, and Connecting Canadians, we don't always look for the technology that solves the immediate problem. We're actually looking for projects that have the capacity to grow, if you like, from 4G to 5G and LTE and that sort of thing. So typically the projects that we look for, and this is why technology is such an important consideration when we look at these remotest areas, is how will this technology evolve and allow for the community not just to be able to have a service today, but a service in the future. Maybe just add as well, the thing that we haven't mentioned, and it's not directly related to your question, but is also satellite service. And of course, there's an evolving technology in the satellite service. We just did recently fund, it was in the last budget, a LEO satellite initiative by Telsat. This does offer huge opportunity in the north to provide new access to broadband at really higher speeds than ever before. So again, a big consideration, and you're totally right to raise this, is what is the right technology for these remote areas? And I think we try to be as flexible as possible and try to also see can the technology that we're putting in today, can it expand in coverage and service and access in the future?
How did ISED support small businesses and diverse ISPs in remote and rural regions in accessing CTI funding?
So I think about a third of the actual companies in the projects are small ISPs. I think one of the reasons we certainly are always talking to small ISPs and looking for opportunities for them to participate in projects. That's the short answer.
Okay. And I just would like to follow up. Has the connectivity map been made publicly available?
It's on the portal.
Is all that
It's on the Canada portal.
Okay. And I think, and also has the Connect to Innovate program website been opened up to allow third-party ISPs and stakeholders interested in the backbone services to apply for those projects? Has that been opened up?
We don't use the portal for application. And there are issues around, in terms of the ISP footprint, about commercial sensitivity, but basically, again, we are trying to promote small ISP participation. We have recently, separate from the program, been consulting with the small ISPs to understand what their challenges were in the programming and how we can do a better job in incorporating their interests. But we definitely, for example, in our projects want to ensure, for example, Indigenous involvement, ISP involvement in the actual delivery of program. And I think we were quite successful in getting Indigenous companies in the CTI case. Is the number 190?
190 communities, and actually a third of the funding is directed to Indigenous communities.
Okay, thank
you. Thank you, Ms. Yip. Now move to Mr. Gustafson, please.
Chair, thank you. I've been following the bouncing ball as well as looking at the paper trail that we have, and I want to come back. I'm still not satisfied we've gotten to the nux of this in terms of the lack of a national broadband strategy, which was recommended time after time after time for 12 years. When the Auditor General went in and asked why there wasn't one, according to what we've heard today, they were reluctant to, and I'm quoting, the department, reluctant to establish a strategy with an objective that could not be reached within the available funding. I didn't hear anything about nuance, about all the problems of trying to bring all the people together. In fact, when it's difficult and tough like this, and with multi-dimensions to the complexity of it, all the more need for a strategy. Even if the first thing you say is, we got to get all the provinces, territories, and federal government on the same page in terms of what we agree on. This is what we need to do. Here's who's responsible. Here's the process. Here's the time frame. But instead, what we're hearing, in my opinion, is governments, plural, who have refused because they didn't want to face the bill. I get the politics of it. But that doesn't make it right in terms of governance. That strategy needed to be in place. And if you look, the response at the time the Auditor General went in was that they hadn't yet done it. Now they're bragging about the fact they're doing it. Let's take a look at the time frame. The audit was done last year, about 18 months ago, usually when they begin. And the deputy has mentioned that there was a meeting in June of last year and October 26th. And between those two, that's when it was decided there needed to be a strategy. Just in time to get in front of the public hearing on the auditor's report. So if nothing else, I want to claim victory for the auditing system that we have in Canada, that after 12 years of governments, plural, dragging their heels on doing the right thing in terms of public policy, it took the Auditor General to roll in there and hold them to account and then come to this committee where, under the glare of public scrutiny, they now acknowledge that they're going to give us a national strategy. And I would submit to you, Chair, that if we'd not had an audit, there still would be no plans for a national strategy. And so I have to say I am rejecting the answers that I'm hearing from the deputy. I understand why you're saying it, and I understand you're part of your role, but you also have a responsibility as an accounting officer now, unlike when I first got here when the rules weren't clear. Now they are. And the public interest was only served if there was a national strategy, and there wasn't one because no government wanted to be held to account for not spending the money it would take to implement it. That's what it looks like to me. But the important thing right now for me is that the strategy is on track. At least it's there. And I also want to mention, if I can, parenthetically, again, this is one of the issues that, most of us don't get too cranked up about because we've got the best service. Most of Canadians live in urban centers and everything is fine. But when I listen to my colleague Carol Hughes, who talks about what's going on in her riding, and when she especially ties it to the banks that are closing branches in her rural areas, the need for internet is not only beyond necessity. I mean, it's right up there with housing and health and food. So, my question is, Mr. Bartolotti, have you had a chance to see the strategy at all?
No, Mr. Chair.
Do you have any current plans to go in and examine the strategy? And I only say that in the context that often the AG will signal ahead of time, look, for particular reasons, we're going back in short order on this one, and sometimes they don't. The current plans?
At this point, we have no current plans to follow up.
Okay, so that's good to know because we can do some follow-up through our report and make sure that there's timelines and accountability. And I just want to ask one more question if I have time. Sounds like I'm going to get one in. It's probably affirming the same thing, but Mr. Bartolotti, you said something that struck me. You were responding to a question from a colleague, and you were talking about the value for money. And at one point you said there were other matters, not just value for dollars, that gave you some concern. And I wondered what exactly you meant by that. It was in response to a member suggesting that things weren't all that bad when you look at what was achieved, and you talked about what you went in and examined, and you said that there were other matters, not just value for dollar, that you believed came into play. So I'll give you a chance to comment on that.
Mr. Legoff.
So, Mr. Chair, one of the concerns that we had at the time of the audit is that priorities made under the Connect to Innovate programs were not made public. So areas that will be considered first were not made public. So we had cases where local groups made some proposals, built business case, but they didn't know that in their province it was always almost determined that another area will get the funding first.
And how was that decision being made?
You may ask the department to answer.
Deputy?
Well, in all respect, I think what I understand is that we followed a very strong due diligence process. I think what the issues at play here are, and they relate to the overall strategy as well, is what are the technologies at play? What are the specific community needs? And by that, I mean, again, it links back to technology in part. One of the things is there's no one solution to putting broadband into any one place. You can do hardwire, you can do mobile, you can do fixed mobile, you can do satellite. So one of the things you need to do from a technological perspective is to try to take into account what are the appropriate requirements for any one particular area. And in this case, and I do want to stress this, and this is why it's the issue of value for money gets complex, and I think given where you come from, you'll understand. These are communities that are of the remotest type. So we're talking about northern Quebec. We're talking about northern Ontario.
Deputy, I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but I have very, very limited time. In fact, I'm probably on borrowed time. But I have to say to you, but what I'm hearing is that there were decisions made about where money was allocated, and because the information wasn't public, we don't really know. And the Auditor General is saying that it wasn't necessarily value for money. That's a nice way of saying it seems like somebody's invisible hand is in there moving stuff around, and hard to hold people to account because there's no public information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. We'll now move to Mr. Graham.
Thank you. I'm going to stay on the topic of value for money for a second. Telecommunications companies invest on the basis of a 3-year investment, return on investment. That's the speed they do it. Is that the speed of return you expect of government investment? Yeah, that's for the Auditor General.
Either Mr. Bertolette or Mr. Legoff.
It was not something that we considered in the audit, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do you consider telecommunications to be strictly a business, or is it, or should it be a public infrastructure?
Mr. Chair, I think the department has already more or less stated it is both. It has both business aspects to it and public necessity to it.
I think I'm going to interrupt a little bit here. I think we have to remember this, that sometimes we're getting into policy, and the Auditor General's responsibility is not to determine the validity of the policy. It's to determine whether or not the policy that is listed, there is a way to deliver it in an effective manner. And I think all of us as a committee have to remember that the parameters of the audit, as listed, were to look and see if there was, I suppose, some value for money, but if it's found in the conclusion, Canada did not develop and implement a national strategy to improve. That's the focus of the audit. So sometimes we get into the weeds on everything else, and maybe that's a good time to ask the department. But the auditors are not going to give us a broad synopsis of connectivity in Canada. They're going to look at these very tight parameters, and I think that's what we have to kind of drill down on if we're coming to the Auditor General. We can branch off to the different sectors if on their way, but we shouldn't even be really going to the policy at all, because the government sets the policy, departments deliver, auditors check to see if departments have delivered. Right? If I'm a conservative and I don't like a liberal policy, that's neither here nor there at this committee. The government sets a policy, the departments deliver on it, the auditors say, did they do it in the best way possible? So if we're going to ask about the process, you can ask the auditors about their audit, but everything else should go to the departments. Mr. Graham.
With respect, Mr. Chair, what I'm looking to find out is if they understand what the value is in this circumstance.
Okay, well.
Maybe I could just add from the department perspective. In terms of value for money, I think what we thought mattered in terms of the Connect to Innovate program was the fact that we leveraged funds. So as we mentioned early on in the Auditor General, people referenced it as the one-to-one. We went from 500 million investment to a billion. In assessing the projects, we also avoided overlap of activity, if you like, so that we ensured that if any one company was doing something, it wasn't covering into another area. So again, we were trying to fix a specific problem. The issue of scale and technology, I think, is part of value for money. And again, our perspective is this is a very important consideration. It's not just how you want to fix it today, but can the companies who are involved in the projects actually develop investments that will develop the technology over time? And then, of course, a number of communities served as part of the value for money. So I think from our perspective, at any rate, it's not just dollars and competition of the private sector involved in the projects. It's these other matters.
Thank you. I have one question left for the AG before I go on to the CRTC, where I have a long list of questions. So I don't think I have enough time for that. Does the Auditor General's office currently participate or have ever participated in the Interchange Canada program?
Mr. Chair, yes, we have.
Do you actively?
I don't think we actively do it, but we have participated in it.
All right, thank you. I'm going to come back to the CRTC, pick up where I left off earlier. On the mandate question I was asking when we ran out of time earlier, if the CRTC mandate were expanded to permit the direct breaking of telecom monopolies and positional abuse, or the power to mandate that a company that services a community must invest in or service the entire community, would the CRTC be comfortable actually applying that?
It's very much a hypothetical question, and perhaps in my response I can also try to answer a question Mr. Arsenault asked earlier. The Commission's role is to overall supervise the industry, and it's the statutory objective, and it goes to the discussion we just had about the CRTC changing the basic service objective. The original objective in telecommunications was universal service, getting every household phone service, and the carriers actually have an obligation to serve. That has not been removed. We do have competition in most places, and we rely to the extent we can on competition. Where there's a lack of competition, we still engage in more traditional, detailed regulatory tools to oversee the services provided. And the Broadband Fund is the vehicle that we hope to use, will use as an incentive and a tool to expand fulfill the broadband service objective in those harder to serve regions.
When will the Broadband Fund application start being open?
The last step in the process, the maps have been updated recently, which is an important step for applicants. We issued what was called a decision guide on Valentine's Day. It was a present to the industry, February 14th, to communities rather than industry. The application guide, if you will, is a bit of an instruction kit to enable parties to understand exactly what has to be filed, how it has to be filed. We're accepting comments on that to make sure we haven't missed anything and that the guide is well understood. The comment period's open now. As soon as that closes, then we will be making a determination about our first calls. But they will be in the coming months.
So where are we in permitting the resale of fiber service?
Pardon me?
Apparently not. Thank you.
No, we'll give time.
Okay,
Yep,
great, thanks.
for the answer.
Thanks.
Yep.
So right now you can resell DSL, you can resell cable, you cannot resell fiber. Where are we reselling on forcing companies that have fiber infrastructure to resell that service, to offer it to
At the
resellers?
moment, if you're talking about fiber to the home, and
Yes.
Mr. Seidel can add, it's in Quebec and Ontario, but Chris, would you like to answer?
Sure. We do have interim tariffs in place for the resale of the fiber, so it's available. We don't have the final rates in place, but we're working on those now, and those will be coming out in a few months. And it is in Ontario and Quebec right now, and we're working to extend that across the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seidel, Mr. Graham. Mr. Kelly.
Chair, Mr. Nilde, in response to Mr. DeBerg Graham's question, you spoke about the having achieved acceptable value for money in several different ways, but the findings of the Auditor General quite clearly say that they found that Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada did not implement its Connect to Innovate program for broadband in a way that ensured the maximum broadband expansion for the public money spent. The program did not include a way of mitigating the risk of government funds displacing private sector investment. So again, I ask you to square your acceptance of the Auditor General's findings and your earlier remarks.
Well, there's always issues of value for money, and we agree with the Auditor General that in doing our work, we should pay attention as a priority to value for money. We are pointing out that in this case, this particular program was being delivered to the remotest areas where there was not a lot of private sector investment interest, and therefore it is important to understand that value for money is not just about competitive private sector investment. It's also about leveraging funds with the provinces. It's about leveraging funds with the communities. And it's about ensuring that you get the right technology to help the community in a way that will be long-lasting.
Understood. If there is no private sector investment to displace, because you're in an area remote enough that it's clearly understood that a private sector operator could never profitably invest in a place, that wouldn't be, I wouldn't consider that displacing private investment just because you've spent money there and not had it matched. Are you having?
Let me just give you a few cases of where the projects took place. One would be in northern Quebec, where we were very partnered with Quebec. In fact, the partnership there is probably a model for how we move forward with a integrated collaborative strategy. We had common applications, common investments, but basically we provided, depending on the area, between 90 and 100% of the funding because there was no investment. In Northern Ontario, 5 communities which currently are served by satellite. Again, there's private sector involvement in terms of the satellite, but in terms of moving to a more fiber to home operation.
Fair enough. I understand that, but the Auditor General states right in the report that they are concerned that the program was to avoid displacing private sector investment, and they are concerned that is a failure of the department, that the department they're
yes. So I would maybe rephrase it not to be a failure, but how I would like to phrase it, and it is an agreement with the Auditor General. Every time we do a project on broadband in rural and remote areas, the challenge is to balance the public investment and the private sector investment and try to do the project in a way that does not crowd out private sector investment that otherwise would have taken place.
We all agree that's the objective.
This is why doing broadband is not easy.
No, I understand that. We're all clear on the objective.
I think the other thing I would just emphasize, maybe you should turn to the Auditor General after I say this, is they were looking at the design phase of our project. And again, I think we've moved past the design phase, and we're talking now about what actually was implemented.
I'll let Mr. Le Goff with the moment I've likely got left.
Can I just add? I think in particular what the Auditor General said was that we didn't specifically ask companies or applicants why is public funding required. In our estimation, we assessed that. We didn't specifically, ask them to pronounce on that, but we assessed those things when we were looking at the applications. So that was one point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Le Goff.
So I would add to what been just said that there was no mechanism in the design of the program to verify if the project could have been funded by the private sector at a lower cost.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I don't have any other questions, but I do have some, and I typically explain to most of my to our guests that when we meet to study, when we meet like this, we provide a report following it. And so I have a couple of questions that have been given to me by the analysts. Before we get to those questions, this is a highly technical type of meeting. And although we're televised, many Canadians may be watching it because, you know, they watch these type of programs, and their eyes may just glaze over. And so, and as Mr. Christofferson suggested, the majority of Canadians live in urban areas, and they say, connectivity problems? What problems? You know, I can game, I can watch a movie, I can do so many different things. But the Auditor General's report explains the reason why we are having this study, and that is in 2016, about 96% of urban Canadians had access to broadband internet speeds of 50 megabytes per second for downloading data and 10 megabytes per second for uploading data. But only 39% of Canadians living in rural and remote areas had access to those speeds. I represent a riding that is rural and not so much remote, but very much rural. And within my Central Alberta riding, there is what we call the special areas, where I know that, you know, when I get into those areas for meetings, that I just watch the phone trying to connect. And so this gap between urban and rural areas is part of why the Auditor General's office did this study. And out of the study, although there has been some improvement over the years, there's some troubling facts. I also should say that if, you know, and some of our analysts have worked on Indigenous files before, the Commission called broadband a transforming, enabling technology, and concluded that any Canadians without this broadband access, and I'm quoting from 1.8, is profoundly disadvantaged. And I mean, you know this. But for the viewers watching, I want them to understand why this is so significant. Governments have stated that we want to see improved health care for our Indigenous and those in remote and rural areas. We want to see specialized health where they have access to specialized health. Part of our universal health care, part of our the Act says that universality, accessibility, and reasonable access to, you know, common delivery is very, very important. That's 3 of the 5 principles of the Health Act. Well, specializing in health and remote means we need broadband, and it means that it has to be a priority. And I think all of us realize it's going to be costly. It's costly to get, you know, originally to get a railway out to the far remote parts, but we said we had to do it. And consequently, this is what governments have said, healthcare, education. If we're going to see Indigenous and remote areas of the North, especially Eastern Arctic, you know, improve their lot in life and have more opportunities, it's going to be through education. And so how do they do it? We do it through broadband, and we do it, so that's why it's important. If anyone is going to have business, and in those special areas, in rural areas, so many now home businesses are starting up, but they completely rely on being able to provide or have opportunities with this business because of broadband and access. And so this is part of the reason. And then when we get into, we have 15 minutes left, so pardon the rant. But then we get into page 13 on the report, and we see the lack of transparency in the selection process. To me, this to me is one of the big problems, and we've talked about it today. But the lack of transparency in selecting the processes for delivery. You know, here's the problem to most Canadians if you're watching. Connect to Innovate had $500 million available for allocation to successful applicants. But the program received 892 applications with funding requests for $4.4 billion. Okay? In some cases, there were multiple projects covered overlapping areas. But here's the problem. We found that the department used a 3-step process to evaluate applications. First, it screened the applications and assessed their merit, so the initial screening. Second, the officials from the department and the minister's office assessed funding options, each including a different mix for eligible projects. But finally, the third step, the minister provides conditional support or approval of the selected projects. So all these areas, not so much area number one, but the other two areas can be politicized and could be problematic. Now, I'm not stating that, that was a roadblock in any way, but certainly it can be viewed as being one. In paragraph 1.57, it found that there were a number of considerations to select the projects. The applications came in, there were a number of considerations to select the projects, but the application guide did not specify the relative weight that each criteria used in the project selection process. So the people applying didn't understand really the weight to each part of it. Projects were less likely to be funded if they did not align with provincial and territorial priorities. However, these priorities were never made public. In our view, the department should have made the weights and the priorities public. Does the department, yes or no, agree with that?
The department, first of all, I'd like to just step back. There's three.
Well, no, just on that one question for now.
The answer is that we did not assign weights because there are different solutions in different areas. And we assess the community needs and the technological requirements, and they vary from place to place. So we believe that it is not appropriate to set one specific set of weights.
All right, thank you. We go to the conclusion, as Mr. Christofferson and others have done, and we see in the conclusion, again, Canada did not develop and implement a national strategy to improve broadband internet connectivity to a specific service level in rural and remote areas. And again, as I represent one of those rural areas, it is problematic. Now, question from our analysts so that we can include it in our report regarding its responses to recommendation 1.60 that ISED should inform stakeholders of the planned available date, location, capacity, and price of the backbone to which they will have access in a timely manner. How has department advised successful project proponents that information on access pricing will be made publicly available in a timely manner as contribution agreements are signed? Ms. Gravel? Oh, no, you're just looking for...
As part of, to be eligible for the CTI program, applicants did need to commit to provide open access infrastructure. And there are provisions in all the contribution agreements. So as the contribution agreements are being finalized, there is a requirement to open that up.
Is this any different than what was recommended by the OAG? So
that was always the intent at the outset. It was a requirement of the program. It was just at the point in time when the audit was done, the program was rolling out, so everything couldn't have been opened up.
So if the Auditor General made a recommendation, he did make a recommendation?
Well, that was the yeah.
Okay, so it is not different than what the OAG.
Yeah.
It's just there's a timing issue. So so we ultimately did, I think, what they raised. Although when they looked at our design, they had questions about it. Is that
All
fair to
right, so
say?
they questioned the design of the delivery.
And then ultimately, when we delivered it, I think we did our best to address that particular issue.
So you're saying in the action plan, although they questioned the design, in the action plan...
In the design phase, as we're looking at how to do the program, yeah. And then when we actually delivered it, this is how we did it.
All right, okay.
Is that reasonably clear?
I think that's an answer. Regarding your response to recommendation 1.81, that ISED should foster secondary markets for unused spectrum in underserved areas, not undeserved, underserved areas. Has the department ever conducted an industry analysis pertaining to the possible effects of mandating secondary market access to unused spectrum? I mean, again, this has been a problem for years and years and years, where spectrum is purchased, everybody puts it into Calgary right away, but the outlying areas don't get it. Has the department ever conducted an industry analysis pertaining to the possible effects of mandating secondary market access to unused spectrum?
So I'd first start by saying that our rules do allow for sub-licensing, and it's relatively easy. But that said, the big providers don't license very much. We have been reaching out to better understand this issue. So on the for smaller service providers, we've been trying to figure out what the challenges are that they're experiencing, and for the bigger providers to better understand why they're not licensing. So the consultations are underway, the outreach with the stakeholders, and we're looking to identify specific obstacles to secondary market transactions.
So Mr. Chair, just I mentioned earlier that we had gone out and consulted small ISP providers. So the short story is these are exactly the issues that we're consulting them on and trying to figure out the best way of moving forward.
But I know that this consultation has taken place. I mean, and on the maps that we've just published, I like the way that our Mr. Scott said that we've just published the map. Those maps have been out. I saw those maps in 2013 or 2014, I'm sure. So, I mean, now we're publishing the maps showing where there's lack. And these consultations as to why, you know, it's been going on forever. Why those underserved areas outside big urban areas aren't being, you know, there's no delivery out there. Is there a cutoff date on the consultation?
No, this is an ongoing consultation. And just I'd just like to shift to another point. With respect to our auctions, and it is relevant, we have deployment conditions. And again, we've been trying to, and the Auditor General raises this question in his report, to increase our deployment conditions so we can get these kind of outcomes that you're talking about, Mr. Chair. So while the department doesn't mandate secondary market access to unused spectrum, it's increasingly trying, as it deploys the spectrum, to put conditions on the players to ensure that there is this kind of use.
So the question that the analysts have given me is, what has the department learned from its consultations? But you're saying these consultations are ongoing. Is it the kind of thing that there's an assessment? Because the consultations have been ongoing for 4 years. And, sure, you know, if it's the same consultation, I'm not sure. But, you know, are they being assessed regularly or when, yes, you know, there is no cutoff, it's ongoing.
Yeah. And I mean, what I would say is just on the spectrum auction. So the 600 auction has deployment conditions. We consult on all of these before we go out, and so basically we understand the issue that that the spectrum is being acquired and it's not being implemented or used, and so we are requiring deployment conditions. So we hear the same things, and we are putting measures in place at the opportunities that we have to get past this.
And to try to be concrete again. When we did the 600, part of the information that we've received from these consultations leads us to decide to do a 40 megahertz set aside. So you know, it is ongoing, but we actually use the information in the application of our policies to licensing and to spectrum.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Scott, there was a time when Mr. Christopherson was giving a speech, and or not a speech, but a speech. And I recognized you, and then I went on quickly. I don't know if you even remember what point it was at that time, but I feel like you had kind of made a notion to me you wanted to speak, and I missed you.
I don't think so. I think it was when Mr. Arsenault had raised the question, and I only began my response. But I think I perhaps
came
gave
up
him
after
an
with
answer in response to another question, and if not, I'd be happy to speak to him after the meeting.
All right. Well, thank you for that, and I apologize if I did cut you off. in the course of you leaving here and making your way back to your offices, you may think, you know what, I didn't get enough time to answer that one correctly, or well, you answered it correctly, but not broadly enough. Maybe you would think that there's more information that we could use in this study, and you wish that you would have disclosed that at the time, and you didn't have time. Please submit anything to us as quickly as you can. If you said something and you wanted to enlarge on it, please do that. We'll take that on the record and use it as part of our study. We do very much thank you for working on a very difficult file. I know when governments, as I've stated already, want to see improvements in the welfare of many of Canadians, and the answer lies on the table that you sit behind, we all hope great success for you. So all the best in delivery. And with that, I think we will conclude our meeting. And so we are adjourned. Thank you for coming.